Okay guys, I normally don't do these types of corny intros where I face myself. This is actually a special episode. What you're about to see is originally taken from the Let's Play series that I was recording. However, something came up. I actually got frustrated at a couple of points in the mid to late game, and I think I came up with some pretty valid criticisms. The reason why I posted this early was because I wanted Damien to see this so he can make changes to the pack and adapt it to other players before they start hitting the same frustrations that I did. Once again, these are what I think are criticisms. This is not, it may seem like my tone was frustrated at the time, but I still want to say that the pack has still been very fun. He's not paying me to say this, but right now I have about 9 times, a little bit over 9 days, right? So that's like 216 hours into the pack. I just crafted, auto-crafted about, oh wow, a lot of my Omnium disappeared. I just crafted about 100 motes of Omnium right now, just to give an idea about how far I am in the pack. So once again, the next about hour and a half, you're going to see is edited footage as I was progressing through the pack. So this is technically a very big spoiler alert for the Let's Play, but if you want to watch it and you want to get my thoughts, or feel free to watch. Another important thing is that if you do get to this stage after me, you might have a different experience, a better experience, but a different experience. So what I experienced might not be reflective to you, and once again, feel free to drop suggestions on how to improve, but I probably won't take your advice or suggestions because I recorded this so far in advance. Also, just another update of my schedule. Once again, I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to play the pack through its entirety, and then I'm going to edit a bunch of videos. I might have 2 to 3 releases per day once the video is actually done. Ignore that my fission reactor kind of had a little accident, but what I'm going to do is I'll probably have 2 to 3 episodes a day. That's the goal. Once I actually finish the pack, I'll be able to just hopefully put them out kind of like how Netflix puts out a season, right, where you can just binge watch everything all at once. I'm gonna try that format, mostly just because it's just most effective for me. It does mean that I won't be able to interact with chat, or not chat, I feel it's an old Twitch habit, but I won't be able to interact with the comment section as much. And I think that's going to be the trade-off. For the most part, if I was going to be interacting in the comments, it'll still be me making jokes or sarcastic remarks, because that's pretty much that's the extent of my interaction with other people on the internet anyways. So I hope you enjoy what's about to happen next. Okay guys, so it's been a while since I actually did any recording. My voice actually disappeared, so I kept on playing without you guys, but let me update on you what. Wow, this is actually quite a bit. It's been almost 3 days since my voice came and went. So basically it's a doozy. You know, like when you step into a lecture and your professor's just like, all right guys, I'm gonna need you to sit up and pay attention because this is going to be important. You can't sleep through this. This is what I'm basically going to try to tell you. Instead of actually getting a couple hours of content where you see me complain and bitch about Nuclearcraft's progression and how Nuclearcraft's use of a Nuclearcraft has been turned into a pretty glorified old processor. Well, yeah, because that's what it boiled down to. In fact, you know how I had plans to make it like pretty? I was like, oh yeah, I'll have water running through it, so it looks like it's being cooled down. Its outer case is being cooled down by water. And I was like, nah, forget all that. So first off, when you design this fission reactor, don't do what I did. This is complete garbage. Actually, if you don't care about Nuclearcraft, right, and you just care about getting through Omnifactory's progression, because my consensus, why I believe that this is a pretty bad source of power. I mean, obviously this is also not the most efficient. In fact, I specifically designed it to not be efficient at all because I just wanted it to process fuels as fast as possible. I just designed it to create as many cells I can comfortably fit in here while also cooling it down actively with the Gallid Cryothium. What we're going to do, because we last left off at Nuclearcraft, we're going to start off with Nuclearcraft. This is a fission reactor. Right, there are 180 cells here, which means that if you look at a normal fuel, let's look at one of the most basic fuels in Nuclearcraft, right, TBU fuels. What it means is that it normally takes 12 minutes to process. Technically, now it's going to be 180 times faster. So take 12 minutes, to times that by 60 seconds, then times that by 20 ticks, divide that sucker by 180. It's going to generate also 180 times more RF per tick. It's also going to generate 180 times more heat. Now in a fission reactor, if your heat level exceeds the max heat level of what's labeled on the right side here, right? I think this is 17 million, right? 17,500,000 heat. This thing goes Chernobyl on you. It doesn't actually explode. What it does is that it will kind of melt, and then there'll be a lot of this molten concrete. I forget what the specific fluid name is. It'll just melt on over and it'll make a giant mess, but Its collateral damage will be that the fission reactor itself gets partially destroyed, but for the most part, it should not explode and blow up all your storage drawers full of stuff above it. It's still a bad thing. You don't want it to go up and overheat, but it won't like crater your whole entire base like an IC2 reactor would. As you can see here, there's also power generation. Now, I normally am against storing any type of energy, but nuclear is kind of the exception. So I could do a redstone control to turn it on when I want energy. But instead, since I want this to be processing all the time, as you can see, it's actually not processing, and I'll get to why it's not processing at the moment. But I wanted this to be processing all the time because really, when you try to move yourself through the nuclear craft progression, and by the way, the reason why you need to travel through the nuclear craft progression is because of motes of omnium, right? So if we look at the motes of omnium, we have stabilized neptunium, plutonium, americium, I don't know which one, curium. Then we have berkelium, californium. Einsteinium's actually not part of nuclear craft normally. That's just custom for the pack. But, you know, you're going to start with thorium and uranium and work your way through these iniums until you get to californium, which is the end tier isotope for nuclear craft. And they serve two parts. First, they can be power. I think the best way you should view nuclear craft in this pack, unless someone comes up with a crazy ass reactor design. I'm willing to be wrong on this one. I'm hoping to be wrong, because every single time I see nuclear craft integrated into a pack, it's kind of sad because their fission reactors are just glorified processors. They're not meaningfully integrated into the pack, right? This could have actually been a decent source of power much early on. Like, I'm talking like LV, MV, right? Not EV, IV, because the EV or insane voltage at ludicrous voltage is where I think I like to classify myself as in ludicrous voltage at the moment. Its integration just feels awful in the pack. I'm like questioning why it's even in the pack, aside from just making myself try to recraft a bunch of these fuels over and over. And I'll actually walk through the tedium of that. Now, I already did it, so thank God you guys don't have to watch it. But this is what I mean by the tedium, right? You started with TBU fuels, and I actually got a lot of TBU fuels because this is made out of thorium. I'm not sure what the BU stands for, but it's just basically a block of thorium-232, right? In fact, actually its old dictionary is fuel TBU, but put it inside nuclear craft fission reactor, and this is what I talk about processing it, because what you really want are what thorium breaks down into after you process it in a fission reactor. You want the neptunium, you want the uraniums, and then you're going to repeat this process over and over and over until you have all these fuels. So what I did with these interfaces, right, you can see that I started off with TBU fuel. I had uranium here earlier, but I just cut that out and replaced it. But you can see this interface as a crafting card, which means I want in this interface to always keep stack of one of each of these fuels. And I just had that process automatically and slowly tiering up. So whenever I have a large order of thorium coming into the base, or a large order of uranium, it'll get processed by my automatic ore processing over there, and then automatically get crafted into TBU fuels, which once again, I have item conduits that just insert the variety of them into this fission reactor. And I do this over and over until you actually get to californium at the end, which is, you know, highly enriched californium-251 fuel. There's a lot of nuances in here, and if you don't want to listen for the nuclear craft nuances, just skip ahead 8 to 10 minutes. But what it essentially boils down to is that this is how I started the whole entire thing off. First was dense coal ore, because I was trying to look at, all right, what's a good source of thorium dust? No thorium ore actually spawns in any of the microminers. That kind of ruled it out. So that pretty much said, all right, looks like I could get most of my thorium from byproduct processing. And the most common one you can actually get it from, oh, you can actually get it from granite. That's super cool. Well, it's 1%, so that's not worth it. Instead of using granite, I actually got mine from coal. Well, there's like 22 pages. It comes from a variety of, even monazite can actually produce thorium. That's cool. Yeah, so you can even order a bunch of monazite. In fact, in hindsight, I think I did coal just because. So if I check out dense coal ore, right? I think I was actually looking for also the lapis. That's why I chose it. But if you're not really struggling for lapis, then you can totally go the monazite route, which should be available right with the tier 5 microminer. And it says it does require a little bit of stabilized uranium at the start. That's completely easy though. You get plenty of uranium just even from the overworld mining to get yourself the first 2 or 3 fuel trips. Now, thorium's one of the other big starts, and what I was processing the dense coal ore here was this nitric acid production. Very simple. I just attached it to the EV line here. Oh, by the way, it's also, I had machines here earlier. As you saw, I moved it over there, but I'll talk back later when I circle back to motes of omnium. So right here is very simple: oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen with configuration 24 to make myself nitric acid. Thing is, it's pretty slow, so I had it actually buffer up quite a bit, a generous amount. When you have this in IV chemical reactor trying to get through all the dense ores. And the reason why I chose insane voltage instead of making another EV chemical reactor to break down the dense ores was because I just had this insane voltage chemical reactor lying around. I didn't want to add another block to the wall of shame. So yeah, each one block breaks down to 16, and then so after ordering like 10, that was like 160 dense coal ores, so 160 times 16, 40-ish stacks of coal ore, which broke down into 40-ish, 80-ish stacks of thorium. And that's what's got me started on thorium. Now you're asking, why is all my thorium gone? Because I processed it. And it's actually kind of important. What you want to do is when you also get that large amount of thorium, you want to siphon off a little, because unfortunately motes of omniums actually do unfortunately require thorium ingots themselves, right there at the bottom right. It's kind of annoying that it requires thorium GregTech ingots, and I can't use like stabilized thorium, right? Because right here is you have this thorium 230, which is a byproduct of when you convert the GregTech thorium into nuclear craft thorium, right? So if that's still confusing to you, let's just look through it, right? So how do you get this TBU fuel? Well, if you look at JEI, TBU fuel comes from these tiny clumps, or it comes from thermal centrifuging. You can thermal centrifuge a thorium oxide, which gives you thorium 232, and that's the spicy one. And once again, you're going to be confused because there's going to be so many isotopes and so many numbers. My suggestion is try to make generous use of the bookmarks within JEI. Like if you wanted to compare what the breakdown differences are between different types of California, or even just uranium, right? So you could do uranium dash, and you'll show a bunch of uranium fuels. What you can do is go to the depleted uranium, right? Oh, actually, it's going to be called E-2. No? EU-2. Yeah, so when I say EU, because it's going to be lowly enriched or highly enriched uranium dash isotope number. So I'm just taking the enriched uranium dash 2 as the nomenclature for each of the fuels. Then I'm going to go to the depleted side, and I'm just going to be like, all right, I'm going to bookmark LU-233. I'm going to bookmark highly enriched uranium-233. And then I'm going to bookmark lowly enriched uranium-235 and so forth. And then finally, you could just right click on the left to see all the different centrifuge processes. You can plan it out, but there is a golden path of progression within Nuclearcraft that is posted in their Discord. I myself didn't follow the golden path of progression as much because the way you obtain the different isotopes varied. I mean, I use it, I didn't follow exactly to the letter. And also there's like, the integration was so poorly done that even following the golden path of progression is not optimal. And if it sounds like I'm frustrated, I am. Like, this was a really upsetting part of the pack. I can see a lot of players just quitting at this part. Like to be honest, I could just see this is just, it straight up, in my opinion, was just not enjoyable. And I think, I don't want to say it hurt me extra, but I could see where, at what points it was not enjoyable, right? Just because it's a glorified processor. You build this super cool multi-block, but it turns out to just be a fucking fancy thermal centrifuge with maybe some energy byproduct. Oh yeah, I also made a capacitor because I think earlier I was saying I normally don't make batteries because I like storing things as fuel. Well, the thing in Nuclearcraft, I just want to zip through and zoom through all the different types of fuels, so I just made a bunch of holding 4 batteries. For some reason, I never even came close to filling it all up, right? I think I came close to filling up just one of these just because they're so OP, right? It's just like 480 million RF times that by 16. That's like, I mean, that's not bigger than a draconic core, but it's like it's one of the tinier draconic core sizes. Now going back to thorium 232, which is a byproduct of when you actually want to process GTCE thorium, right? It has no uses. So that was my first little kind of annoyance. I made a little bug report there. Just give it a use. Let it be turned into my suggestion, because you know how modes of Omnium require GTC thorium ingots. My suggestion was make a stabilized thorium liquid and solid. Same thing with plutonium, same thing with neptunium and uranium. Let your thorium 230 break down into stabilized thorium, and then let that, because otherwise now you can have a recyclable thorium 230. And just to give you an idea, these are tiny clumps. These are, remember, this is 3 days of missed footage you can see, but these started off as tiny clumps. So that's 27K thorium that I processed inside these 4 thermal centrifuges that are insane voltage. That's what it took to get me started with the nuclear craft. And I mean, I'm not talking about like the numbers are fine, but these were thermal centrifuge processing. So like if I knew it was going to be that bad, I would have made like 8 more thermal centrifuges so I can get it done in a day instead of having waiting up 3 days for it. And this is with the chunk loading. Another thing is that with all this processing, my power costs came up, right? So I actually made a power monitor. So right now my base at idles, quote unquote idles, at like 200k RF per tick, or 230k RF per tick. At peak, it uses about 430. But remember when I said these 4 distillation towers is enough to power the base at 32k EU per tick? That's 120-ish RF per tick. So I've been actually going over my peak oil production amount for a while. And as you can see here, my cetane boosted diesel, I think when I last left the recording, was like 460. I think it was approaching 470. Now I'm eating up all my cetane boosted diesel. I went through like 70,000 buckets net, and this is still with, and remember, this is still with this advanced mixer constantly running in the background. Like, see how fast it's using up? It's creating cetane boosted diesel. I am still continuously outpacing that use on top of everything else in the base. So that actually brings me to another point, which I'm going to talk later down the line, is that your power options get kind of shitty at this point, right? Nuclear craft is not a viable power option. Once again, I'm willing to be wrong if someone makes like a amazing design, but once again, this design also has to be competitive with diesel. It has to be competitive with solar panel spam, right? Like, I'm not going to make a 24 by 24 by 24 size fission reactor and then repeat it with a bunch of repeatable designs when I could just make solar panels. That's just, I don't know. It might be fun to some people, but it doesn't feel like a real option to me. I did this over and over. I went through TBU, then I went through the plutonium route, then that plutonium became neptunium. And here's one thing I want to talk about. The general breakdown of each isotope, like let's go to neptunium, right? Actually, no, neptunium is a bad example for this. Plutonium. Plutonium has various isotopes, and you're just wondering, what does each isotope do? This is so confusing. So what I need to know first off is that within every element, there is an isotope that is used to enrich or form the rest of the fuels. See here how plutonium, and what I mean by that is that plutonium 242 is the isotope that creates the basis or the glue of all the various fuels, right? So if I wanted to make highly enriched plutonium 239, obviously I'll need the plutonium 239, and then I'll need plutonium 242 to make up for the rest of it. You can either use oxides or normal plutonium 242. If I wanted to make lowly enriched plutonium 241, I'll need one of the plutonium 241s, and all the rest is plutonium 242s. So you can see the importance and the demand that plutonium 242 will have when you try to make all the different types of fuels within nuclear craft, right? So as a general rule of thumb, you do not want to make your plutonium 242 into stabilized plutonium, right? I have like about 1K stabilized plutonium. Once again, this has uses in scenarium. It has uses in fuels for microverse projectors. It also has uses in becoming motes of omnium. What you want to do though, because you're going to be so busy using plutonium 242 to make fuels, because once again, you also need to progress your fuel progression, right? Once you make plutonium, beyond that, you also need to have neptunium and follow that down to americium and follow that down to curium and so forth. So it doesn't end at plutonium. So you have to strike a balance. In this case, I didn't have an exact balance because I wasn't sure of, so I just threw out arbitrary numbers, right? And these arbitrary numbers were based on the drawers that I had set up here. Once again, before, I think this drawer system was earlier dedicated to, you know how it was solidifying argon and solidifying oxygen or nitrogen? I got sick of that setup because I was just like, I kept switching. It just felt overall clunky. Like I just had this one fluid extractor. So I ended up making like, how many of this? Like 12 fluid solidifiers and like 8 fluid extractors to go with it. These are going to join the wall of shame, I think, depending on how the setup looks like at the end. So I set these up with these drawers, and these are arbitrary numbers. I don't know if these are going to be higher or lower. Just keep tuned if you want to know. But I was like, all right, you know what? I'll just keep 1K plutonium in stock. And there is also a buffer of 64 buckets. In fact, it's actually pretty generous with the recipe at least. 144 millibucks plutonium makes 2 stabilized plutonium. So this is quite a lot. Breaking this fluid solidifier would make me quite sad. But I don't have export buses on these. I thought I would have export buses, but instead I thought, you know what, I'll just manually fill it up. As I say that, I have a bunch of plutonium 242. This is why I said it might have been a bad example. But in this specific case, I have a crap ton of plutonium 242 due to all the uranium processing. So I take back what I said, but you want to be careful about how much you actually siphon off. But I have like 3,300 plutonium-242, and then I have possibly, I don't know, another 4,000-ish left to go. 5,000. I have another 5,000 tiny plutonium. So I can make stabilized plutonium for days. The important thing is to realize is that if I run out of plutonium-242, I cannot form and progress, you know, plutonium-238 isotopes and plutonium-239 isotopes. So this is something you have to manually track. And it's one of those things, if it's just a spreadsheet can help you, laying out the fuel numbers in person can help you, like having a physical layout that you can stare at. That's also helpful. Just make sure you track it somehow, because you occasionally have to siphon off various nuclear craft isotopes to balance between progression and general crafting use. Now, like I said, the end goal here is to get to californium, and some other nice byproducts are the RTGs. So you can get uranium RTGs, which makes 4 RF per tick. It's fucking terrible. Don't make it. Plutonium RTGs, which is kind of reasonable, right? But it's based on plutonium-238, and I would rather you can make plutonium-238 fuels. Actually, sorry, no. It's based on plutonium-238, and it actually has no other uses for fuels. Right? So if you do have plutonium-238, you can either just extract it into stabilized plutonium, but you can use 242 for that, or you can also just turn it into RTGs. But still, once again, it's really up to you how you want to use it. Same thing with americium. And the thing is, when you want to make the RTGs, the isotopes that's being turned into RTGs cannot be used for fuels anymore. At that point, I think it's done and over with. Like you cannot use americium-241 to form any other fuels for nuclear craft progression. So if you find yourself at this dead end of progression, congratulations, just turn into an RTG or something. Californium RTG, that's actually pretty worth it. Another member in the Omnifactory Discord server, I think he's one of the most farthest ahead before he restarted his playthrough. He ended up making like almost 1,000, maybe more, 1,000 Californium RTGs to supplement his base power, because really nothing else fucking worked in the late game. Like power was so bad in the late game. Now, after the bountiful update, Naquita reactors, the custom multi-block Naquita reactors, these have been buffed significantly so they can be viable. The issue is that they're post-mote, right? Just because they require block of black steel, and block of black steel requires it's trimmed with motes of omnium. So this is what I was talking about. There's this weird paradigm in the late game where pre-mote, you're kind of strapped for power, and you don't have any other choice except to scale up power solutions that were in HV or MV or LV power solutions, right? Because to be honest, even though this is an insane voltage power producer, quote unquote, these diesel generators, theoretically, this is based on the same solution that I made back in LV, MV with the oil rigs, right? Everything has been derivative of foundation. I mean, that's partially my playstyle because I wanted to choose oil because I know I can milk it for really long, but it's getting to the point that I have to do this again. Like, I'm okay with making using these diesel engines all the way up to insane voltage, but now I'm at ludicrous voltage, going up to ZPM requirements, right? Because these are all LUV blast furnaces, and I'm at this awkward point where I'm just like, oh, I have to do this up to ZPM as well? I thought I would have more variety by this point, but the variety that comes in the pack is either to make Californium RTGs or to make tier 7 solar panels. I think that was another player, Schlip. He made a couple hundred of these tier 8 and tier 7 solar panels for his power solutions. So that's also a little bit awkward because, I don't know, man, that's not how I roll. Even though these solar panels are actually a little bit, they look expensive, but they actually make times 4, right? And this one only costs 2 osmiridium plates. Obviously, the derivative solar panels, it can easily stack up in terms of costs. But still, like, overall, these solar panels can also be viable, but I don't want to be spamming solar panels. I don't want to be spamming RTGs, right? I wanted to make a goddamn fission reactor and have that produce power, but that doesn't because it's a glorified processor. And by the way, Enigmatica 2 Expert also had this problem, and Greg Block also had this problem with nuclear crafts integration. This is a common reoccurring theme in expert packs that have nuclear craft, and most of the time, most people don't even know this exists because they'll just use the fucking fusion reactor from nuclear craft anyways. The nuclear craft fusion reactor is so goddamn good and so simple to set up versus, I think, the beautiful complexity of a fission reactor. Now, what about using molten salt reactors and a 2-stage turbine cycle that you could get from nuclear craft? That also didn't seem to have that good of a payoff. Well, at least depending what it cost, it was like 40k RF. In the end, I just weighed it down between adding another diesel engine, and plus here's nothing with molten salt fusion reactors, it's just that our molten salt fission reactors still sourced its fuel from the fission reactor. I think it was like, man, my math could be totally wrong here, but I think it was only about 8 times better than what this was. And 8 times is a lot. 8 times is a lot better than what I currently had right now, especially if I bother trying. But I still don't think it just beat how renewable and how good the oil rigs are, and just adding more cetane boosted diesel. So basically what it boils down to in terms of power is that I have to figure something out before I run out of these 400,000 buckets. And to be honest, I can. There is this awkward sprint where if you didn't have enough diesel power backed up, it's like saving for retirement, right? Like if you didn't save for your retirement earlier on with having a nice buffer of cetane boosted diesel, you might find yourself shit out of luck towards the late game, which is an uncomfortable place to be, and that could cause a lot of players to just quit, because what I'm quoting like the end game would be post Mote of Omnium. So I'm at pre-mote, and I think I already covered the hopefully I covered the nuclear craft stuff in enough detail. In general summary, you're just reprocessing fuels over and over. You get a smidgen of power back, and like when I mean smidgen of power, it's like you sometimes get like 100. I can get like 120 KRF per tick with this fission reactor, and I also, I mean, this is a shamble job, so you can also take this all with a grain of salt, right? Take these criticisms and make sure you also put your own considerations into it, just because I will openly admit, right? Like all I did was how many reactor cells can I put in and what's the minimum level effort amount of cooling? And I chose active cooling with gallium cryothium just because when I looked at the configs, it looked like it was the easiest item to make, that it had the best effort to cooling ratio compared to all the others. Nether quartz was also another one too, because everyone automates the shit out of nether quartz. But I had deep mob learning and it was easier for me to automate gallium cryothium. If you're wondering why all this glass is here, it's just that so I can see, because reactor cells are transparent themselves. So I needed a frame of reference to where I was because I started putting down reactor cells and I was just like, it's like, ah, shit, I had to checkerboard it. And the reason why I checkerboard is just because it'll just produce unnecessary fuel without actually giving me any extra energy benefits. That takes care of the fission reactor. I also at the side made this large microverse projector. One important thing for the microverse projector I want to point out is that when you design it, make sure your quantum compressors, just like the others, face the same direction that your modular machine controller is. And the main reason why is because it's meta sensitive. Once again, if you look at the compressors, it's metadata 4. Technically in the configs, it's supposed to be metadata 2, but that's if it faces north. Since my modular machine controller is facing west, all of these also have to face west, which makes it metadata 4. If you don't understand the metadata, just make sure, once again, your quantum compressors face out the same direction your machine controller is, aka facing away from your energy input and your huge item output. Another part too is that when you're also doing the microverse projector, so when you do the tier 6 miners, when you first make this, you actually use a UV energy and IV energy input hash, which only takes about 65k RF per tick, which is not enough. So before you start any tier 6 missions, make sure to upgrade your hatch. Otherwise, you'll throw in a tier 6 mission and all of a sudden you'll be kind of shit out of luck because you'll have to break and replace this energy hatch. And when you do break it, you lose the inputs inside. This voids the inputs if the multi-block structure becomes undone in the middle of a recipe. So before you lose a tier 6 miner like me and cry about it. All right, so there we go. And let's put the glass back. This also wants energy, but that's for another day. Now, another problem I think was I made a discovery that package recipe holders can actually it can hold multiple recipes. Here, let me show you what I mean by that, because I decided to dedicate one package entirely just for all the ships and motes. I didn't realize this before, and before I actually was encountering a lot of bugs and glitches in the system because I was actually doing one recipe package per recipe, and I had a bunch of blank and buggy default recipes. So it's confusing the system because it was thinking, all right, you have multiple packagers here with the tier 6 recipe holder. Which one do you want me to send it to? And I had no idea what was going on with that system until, you know, someone pointed out, hey, these things can actually handle more than one 9x9 recipe. So you can see here it handles 20 recipes total. So that's actually kind of cool. And more importantly, these recipe package holders don't actually have to match exactly slot for slot, right? What the other recipe package is. This just lets you create recipe packages, right? So I can create tier 6 miners here, and then I can have that be unpacked at the tier 6 automation table. In fact, maybe I shouldn't have done that because I'm pretty sure I had, yeah, I had tier 6, I had tier 6 miners in the queue. So don't do that. Don't be like me. But what I did here is I actually have tier 6 miners at this specific table. Oh, by the way, I also ended up breaking these packagers out because when this automation interface gets clogged or if it's not fast enough, it was actually sending items back into the ME interface, back into my ME system. So that was kind of this weird loop. I thought there would be detection because most of the time when you have automation, when I do automation like this, and the alloy smelter gets filled up, it's not going to send it back into the system. So I thought it would mimic that behavior, but apparently it didn't, or maybe it does and I'm hallucinating, but I'm pretty sure it was sending items back into my ME system. So as you can see here in this recipe holder, it only has one recipe, just one unpacking recipe for the Enderium plated. This here has one unpacking recipe for tier 5, and this has one unpacking recipe for the tier 4. So kind of mimicked all around. That takes care of the large multiverse and the new ship recipe packages. Fission reactors, tier 6 miner. Complained about the lack of power options in the late game. Well, actually, I compared about the lack of power options pre-mote. Post-mote, it opens up, and I'm kind of excited to get access to GregTech fusion reactors post-mote. But until you actually do all the mote of Omnium automation, you have to rely on previous infrastructure because nothing really opens up new once you get past HV, right? Like maybe the most exciting thing would be like pneumatic dynamos and fission reactors, but even those aren't really super exciting enough to tide you over until you get to the post-mote era. Anyways, so the mote, and the thing is, why do you need a lot of power for post-mote anyway? Most of these seem to be like even making stabilized plutonium should be like an energy positive. It's really down to this dark solarium ingot. Like if you want to make 500 of these motes, like you're gonna have to put 32k EU per tick out quite a bit. So that was just the only annoying thing for me. There's also a chance there was an element of overkill just because I'm willing to admit I made like 2k Enderium. I'm not sure how necessary that is. I made like 5k Signalum, right? I also made like 1.5k Lumium. So once again, you know, all of these changes, and I'm still making Lumium. And I've also smelted like, I don't know why, I just smelted a bunch of 40k lanthanum ingots. So, okay, you know what? That's a fair point. You can also just be like, wow, Viro's complaining about power sources when he's clearly just smelting lanthanum ingots, which have like 0 uses, except for being used inside a fucking mote. So that's completely fair. That's like the equivalent of smelting like 20k neodymium ingots. But really, the thing is though, at this stage, I feel like I should have more options for power if I wanted to be smelting. It's just weird that I have the ability to make ludicrous voltage energy input hatches and power them. And that's one thing I liked about the power system for the most part up until late game, is because how I viewed it for Omnifactory was just that its early game power can normally be covered by GregTech, but it was heavily supplemented by thermal expansion. And thermal expansion power scales well within its own mod, but I mean, thermal expansion doesn't have anything that consumes hundreds of thousands of RF. So therefore, its power producers don't really comfortably produce hundreds of thousands of RF. GregTech Community Edition does have elements that consume hundreds of thousands of EU per tick, and therefore they have good power balancing that lets you make hundreds of thousands of EU per tick. And players can normally follow GregTech's power progression for the most part, because that was left intact with the pack and supplemented by stuff like the oil rigs. But there's this huge break. This pack decides to just break a lot of GregTech's endgame generation, especially the turbines and fusion reactors post-mote. So by putting it behind the mote, you know, you put this really big gap, this huge sprinting area where you need to finish the motes to actually get decent power again. So it is a very uncomfortable situation. I mean, obviously, it wasn't 3 days. It was like actually like a day and a half where I used up like 70k buckets. So I mean, I technically do have enough power for like another week of playing. So this could all just be exaggerated. But the real problem is that it feels bad, right? I'm supposed to be a part of the pack where scarcity doesn't happen as much, or shouldn't happen, at least not with major resources. And I'm still feeling like there's a huge level of scarcity. Normally The only thing that limited me before in terms of building up infrastructure was infrastructure. Now what's limiting me from building up infrastructure is power at a late in the game. Because I can build better power consumers than I can build better power producers. So that contract that GregTech always had has been kind of broken. I'm going to stop talking about power. I made some aqueduct coils. That's why I put torches over here. But I guess that's pretty fucking obvious now if you just watch me fly around. Now we just have to look at what do we need next to finish all these motes. So if you look at all these motes, scrolling through here, it looks like, okay, need vanadium, need indium, dark solarium, yttrium, stabilized berkelium, einsteinium, night slime, americium, stabilized curium. Let's work on vanadium. So vanadium dust is kind of awkward. Oh, well, actually, no, I have plenty of vanadium. It's funny because vanadium dust actually, I'm not actually sure how to get a renewable source of vanadium. I know that sounds kind of bad, but I actually have no idea where all the vanadium went because I know all your earlier source of vanadium is coming from vanadium magnetite. So I didn't see it in any of the microminers. Like if I do vanadium ores, vanadium magnetite, yeah, I don't think a microminer has any of them. But I mean, it's not like you need a crap ton of vanadium, right? You only need like maybe 500. So I don't even know how many motes you make until you get to the creative portable tank. I didn't do that math yet. What I do know is that I'm at least going to make a fusion reactor with the motes, and then we'll see what else with the rest of the motes that I need. Actually, do I have any hot ingots I forgot about? Ooh, I have a crap ton of hot ingots. Okay. I swear to God, I thought I had yttrium taken care of earlier. Apparently I didn't. Ooh, I also have naquita alloy ingots to be taken care of. That's cool. Okay, so that takes care of most of the current hot ingot situation that I have. It also takes care of yttrium and naquita alloy. So now let's look at what's next. Dark solarium. Here's the spicy one. Wow, dark solarium ingots require solarium, dark steel, and tritium and dark solarium. So tritium is actually a derivative of deuterium. And I think I made a lot of deuterium earlier from just centrifuging hydrogen. You can also get it from moon dust, but I don't think I've had any moon dust recently. Oh, I guess I could run. How's my moon dust doing, actually? Do I still have leftover moon dust? Only 64. Okay. Or did I process all my deuterium already? Oh, okay. I only have 460 buckets of deuterium. So 460 buckets of deut makes how many buckets of tritium? That's 40. So you divide that by 4 again. So that's like 100 buckets of tritium, which is like 100 buckets of dark solarium ingots. Let's find something else. What I could tell you though is that mode of omnium is not happening at this episode. So vanadium ingots coming back in, yttrium's coming back in, that's already taken care of. Dark solarium's whatever. Stabilized berkelium and indium ingots. Oh yes, okay, so indium. Once again, this weird ass recipe keeps coming back up. So indium was made from purified gallium and sphalerite. In fact, that's what I actually did here, right? I have purified galena ore and sphalerite ore, and I got each of these from just running. I either ran 10 missions, 32 missions, or 64 missions, and I think I ran a bunch of tier 5 missions, and that just gave me sphalerite. And that's another thing that you guys might have missed in the 3 days. I was just literally logging on, ordering like 32 missions at a time. And then once the mission came in, I went back to my ore processing area where the amount of export buses has started to breed and multiply. These export buses are a mix. It's like either depleted fuels, purified piles, rare earths, more depleted fuels. But literally I designed it in such a way that I could get the desired byproducts. Because once again, I talked before about how you can have the side grade path with purifiers, with the ore washers, or the upgrade path if you want via the thermal centrifuging of ores. So sphalerite, I specifically just chose to macerate and wash it because I don't care about gallium anymore. In fact, I have like 60k gallium, and if you're wondering where I got that, that was from centrifuging a lot of thermal centrifuging a fuck ton of bauxite. Each bauxite ore once again provides 6 crushed bauxite ore. You thermal centrifuge that, so that's 6 centrifuge bauxite ore from 1 ore, and then you pulverize that and you get 100% chance of gallium. So 10k bauxite ores become 60k gallium. Like I have more gallium than I do bauxite, but that once again only comes with the territory once you have insane voltage processing. So let me throw in this sucker. Oh, by the way, I also set up a ludicrous voltage area, a very small ludicrous voltage area, but it's just here just to process some of the bigger plate requirements. And I actually also made a ludicrous voltage assembling machine because I was getting tired of making crystal circuits. And in fact, my circuits kind of generous. I have like 400. I try to keep about 200 to 600 in stack of each of the basic circuits, and then I'll make stuff like crystal processors and crystal processor arrays on demand as I see fit. All right. so now we have to work on night slime. In fact, night slime shouldn't even be that hard, right? It's like pretty much titanium and a slime block. That's just easy peasy. So let me get a chemical reactor. We'll just use an EV chemical reactor for this, nothing too fancy. It's gotten to a point now where instead of using HV resources, I'm just starting to use EV just because I have like 5k titanium. It's easier for me to make titanium than it is to make stainless steel. And when I say easier, I mean it's less clicks. So the less clicking parts, that's an important thing for me. One thing I have noticed that as the base has continuously grown and grown after this update is just that there is significant block lag. This actually might be a syncing issue because the server doesn't seem to be suffering at all, but like when I put something down, it actually takes like, you know, a couple of seconds before it connects with the ME system, right? The thing is though, when I'm talking to other players, they don't seem to be getting any lag when I put stuff down. So it just might be me trying to sync to the server. And then, oh boy, I just realized it requires fluid titanium. That's awkward. So let's say if it requires fluid titanium, I'll have to put a fluid extractor down. Oh, but these are HV fluid extractors. Oh, curses. Foiled. All right, well, you got me this time. You know what? I'm dumb. I already had an HV extractor set up here. All right, so this chemical reactor is going to go on the wall of shame. That was close. Okay, so you know how I was talking about that if you break stuff, if you break great tactile entities with an area of effect, I almost got through the whole entire pack by avoiding that. But looks like I didn't. Good thing the only casualties though were my cables. Wow, because I mean, I guess losing an EV chemical reactor wouldn't have been that big of a deal because I was focused on the EV chemical reactor with the breaking. That stayed, but everything else that was broken by the AoE got voided. So the cables disappeared. So right here, we'll have the filter. So the interface is going to go here. It's going to export titanium ingot and a slime block. In fact, do I even have slime blocks? Okay, I have the ability to make slime blocks. All right, so right now what's going to happen is that this is going to extract here from the small storage crate, and we're going to have it insert, oh shoot, this is almost full. Nope, I could take out gallium arsenide. It's going to insert titanium into here, right? And that's going to extract that. Let's just make 100 of these. I might actually run out of slime balls. I'll have to run a slime deep mob learner or something. And here we'll have priority for a slime block. But if I recall correctly, there should be a robot arm that actually controls what gets input into this chemical reactor. Yeah, okay. So I'll have to put the robot arm there. And perfect, that should be it. So now if I put the robot arm back, the slime block back, it'll take the robot arm, and then it'll spit out the night slime. So the night slime seems pretty slow, but to be honest, what do I need night slime for? So I need like a set of night slime to get the ultimate helmets and shit. And then I'll need this ultimate helmets later down the line to make the infinity helmets, which is used for the creative storage upgrade. All right, that's fine. But aside from that, I think night slime is only really used to make exotic materials catalysts. What I'll do is I'll order up 100 of these night slime ingots. Hopefully that should tide me over for now. Do I have a slime? I don't have a slime. I don't have a slime data model. I'll put that on this to-do list. I won't do it later. I mean, I'll do it later. All right, so now we have indium ingots, which, oh yeah, I like how it went to do indium and I just forgot about it. Indium is really simple though at this point. It's just getting the dust is just a pain in the ass. Like once again, I had that set up before where I had the chemical reactor make the indium concentrate, which is actually based on sulfuric acid. And it's been eating a lot of my sulfuric acid lately. Right, like this, it's constantly eating through it. It makes indium concentrate, which combines with aluminium dust to make one tiny pile of indium. So indium is just, Oh, you know what? I didn't even see this recipe for uranium-238 because I kept complaining about running out of uranium-238 because it's used, once again, as the isotope to make all the other fuels. It's actually even used to make MOX fuels when you combine it with plutonium. That's partially the reason why I chose to do highly enriched fuels as well, just because highly enriched fuels require 4 of the nuclear, the enriching isotope, 233, and then the base isotope of 238. I don't know what the terms are in actual nuclear terminology, but there's like the base isotope and the enriching isotope. And then once you get the tiny pile of indium, it's also going to have this weird byproduct of lead zinc solution. It basically has your galena and sphalerite being processed as well. So it is technically another way of processing galena and sphalerite. But I mean, lead and silver you get from DML, zinc. You don't need that much zinc in the later game. And sulfur comes in spades from various other sources. I have it go back into the system, but I mean, if there was a trash can here, I also wouldn't bat an eye at that. So now what I can do is I can do requesting, and just because I want to keep indium dust as tiny piles of indium dust in case they need it for anything else. Like you might need indium when you want to make indium gallium phosphide. So what I'll do is I'll just keep it as tiny dust and have recipes to on demand, because really getting indium ingots is really simple. I can just have it request to be smelted, right? So I can put one pattern here by the multi-furnaces where I can request smelting of indium, and I'll put the dust crafting there. So can I request? Yes, I can request 100 indium ingots. That's perfect. Now, if I want to have 100 motes again, curium, americium, berkelium, and einsteinium. So einsteinium is actually kind of interesting because you can't actually create it. Well, you could technically create it from a fusion reactor from berkelium californium, which I don't think is a very good recipe. I see what Damien was going for here, but this is so out of whack with all other types of fusion reactor recipes. It's so bad. The most I could say, I'm assuming this was a recipe designed to test what he could add to fusion reactors, because this feels so bad. I'm not sure if it's going to be worth it, just because you can just easily get that from setting a tier 6 miner with a stack of stabilized plutonium. First of all, this should be a lot faster. 10 seconds is an age and a half when it comes to fusion reactor production. Like everything else here takes like 3.2 seconds. Even that's making the quadria, right? That's making like a really high tier material. Now you could say that it's making 8 millibuckets, but these are 3 millibuckets. This is, 60 millibuckets of tungsten is 0.8 seconds, right? And these are all lower voltages as well. This starts at 61K already. Duranium is one of the high tier Greg Tech materials. If I look at neutronium, like can I make neutronium from fusion reactor? I can. That's 10 seconds. So this is the granddaddy of materials. But you're telling me that einsteinium matches neutronium in terms of timing? Like that recipe is so bad in a fusion reactor, I'm pretty sure that it shouldn't be there. If you are going to make einsteinium though, get it from a microminer. 100 times better. Quantum flux is costless. The wither realm data costless. The real cost is inside the enderium, but that's also fine as well. Stabilized plutonium you should have plenty of anyway with plutonium 242. So let's look at what berkelium do I have, and can I siphon that away to make berkelium, stabilized berkelium. Berkelium. I'm trying to like move off of Berkeley, right? Like the famous university near the Bay Area in the US. So if it's pronounced like Berkeley, that'll be berkelium. I don't know. But as you see before, berkelium, just like plutonium 242, that's the isotope you use to create other fuels, right? So you take 248, you combine that with 247, you get the oxide fuels. I have it as highly enriched berkelium 248, but I keep running out of 248. So I will siphon off the extra berkelium 247, use that to create the stabilized berkelium. So I'll just dump it here. Oh, I already have curium here. My bad. Why is this not ejecting? Oh, all right. So then I will have to make more jars here. Okay, so you can hold the berkelium. Congratulations. So 144 millibuckets of berkelium thankfully makes 8 stabilized berkelium. So 1 stack of berkelium byproducts from nuclear craft can make 8 stacks of berkelium, which is all you really need, really. It depends though. Like once again, I'm preparing to make 500 motes. That's like the general number that I've had so far with all of these isotopes. If I have to make, and that means I'll have to make 500 dark solarium ingots. So we'll see how I'm pretty sure I have enough cetane boosted diesel to handle that. It's just, how long will it take? So that takes care of berkelium and curium, excitingly enough. So that leaves me with americium. So once again, look at this. I'm looking at americium. My chosen fuel for the progression path was highly enriched americium 242, which leaves me with americium 241 and 243. As you can tell by how much 243 I have, you could probably guess that americium 243 is the fuel that you use to create the americium fuels, right? You can see here, you use 5 americium fuels to make highly enriched americium 242. One thing I want to point out though is that I have a bunch of americium 241. Americium 241 is used to make an RTG. So I can either choose between making americium with it, which is an element used in Greg Tech crafting, or can I not make stabilized americium with this? Oh, you know what? Stabilized americium doesn't even exist. Do I not need it for motes then? Works for me. So maybe americium was a part of nuclear craft that wasn't needed then. Einsteinium, berkelium. No, it's right there. Stabilized americium. Oh no, I can't solidify it. I guess I just missed this recipe then. Yeah, I missed it. So I can either use 241. I can use americium 241, which can be turned into RTGs, which give me 50 RF per tick constantly. I guess is this. I'm not going to use that right now. I'm just going to use americium 243, right? This isotope, just like plutonium 242, which can be used to create other fuels, but you get so much of an excess. And the reason only I get so much of an excess of this is because of my fuel progression path. So once again, you need to figure out when you can use free americium you want to siphon off from the fuel progression, and once you want to keep to, the ones you want to siphon off to make Motes of Omnium, and the ones you want to keep for your standard fuel progression. I mean, honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to miss like what 3.2k RF per tick of RTGs, of Americium 241 RTGs. So yeah, you know what? Here's what I'll do. I'll turn these into stabilized Americium. So today on Discord, I learned it's called semantic saturation. It's when you say a word enough times, it starts to lose meaning. Like, you know, I think the example given in the Omnifactory Discord was someone talking about programming games and developing games, and when you say the word player too many times, you're just like, what is a player? I'm getting kind of close to that to Americium. Like, it's just like, I don't understand that word anymore. I've been saying it, I've been repeating it so many times. And the reason why I'm also using vibrant alloy cables instead of my signature aluminum cables is because, unfortunately, these fluid extractors are they're not forgiving in terms of what cable loss, because a lot of their extraction recipes use up the exact voltage, so you can't have any loss. Even at HV, you can't have any loss. The other thing, it's not recognizing, because I don't even have a storage bus on here. That's why. All right, and solidifier gets pushed into there. I need a ball mold. By the way, I might come off more overly critical in this episode of the pack, and I think the pack is still worth playing through up to this point, but I can see a lot of what I'm going to say is that, okay, the reason why I seem more critical of this pack is you can clearly see where the playtesting stopped. You can clearly see where Damien was being careful and probably playing the pack but this is me speculating. He might have playtested up to this point, but I'm pretty confident that I would not be having these same complaints if he did playtest it, because you can see the clear drop off. I'm not even looking at the quest book. There could be even guidance in the quest book, but there's a clear drop off in cohesion of the progression. And once again, that contract that's always been part of Greg Tech and the pack. When you can produce a consumer, you should also have the ability to produce the power to feed that power consumer. Now it's not the same. Your production capabilities no longer match your ability to produce consumers of that. Like, if I want to make Omnium, I technically don't have, I do have the production capabilities to make Omnium and consume Omnium, but not when it comes to power. Like, I can't make Dark Solarium comfortably overnight without keeping an eye on how much cetane diesel I'm using. And so what I'm trying to say is that contract has been broken. And I think that if someone played through this part of the pack, you should be able to recognize that this is happening, that, you know, your agency drops off a cliff. But that's what it at least feels like to me. I mean, this could be, and once again, this is actually a fault of a lot of endgame packs, right? I want to say interactions could probably have some of this own fault as well. This is not specifically only Omnifactory. CevTech was notorious for this. Oh my God, CevTech's stage 5 was probably some of the most disappointing gameplay I've ever had. Well, it's disappointing because stage 1 to 4 was so well polished that stage 5 just kind of felt like a weird cluster. And, you know, this is not AAA titles. These are just small independent game devs. I hope they don't take this criticism personally. This is just how, this is just the nature of these things, right? You don't have a massive beta testing team. In fact, I'm pretty much willing to wager that Schlip and Jimmy were pretty much one of the first players to get to this point and identify these problems. And then I came along and I'm just, tearing in a new one, I feel like. I do feel kind of bad about pointing this out. Especially to you 1,000 viewers, but it's really just, this is what it feels like. In fact, you know, it's funny just because my delay in editing has been so bad that I might not even get 1,000 viewers. It might be like 200 at this point. But yeah, that's what it really feels like it has come down to. So this takes care of my Americium, which now leaves me with Berkelium. No, wait. Curium's also done as well. Even better. And Californium's also done. Wait, where does that leave me? Oh, snap. These are really good numbers. Oh, you know what I need to do? I also need to I was thinking about putting storage downgrades on these, but I actually don't need storage downgrades or upgrades on these machines because I'm feeding these manually. So these should never actually like go insane in terms of production because they're always being manually fed. So I'm going to remove all these downgrades. Now, if I do look at my uranium production, I also have like a bunch of uranium 233 and 235. That's because uranium 238, and that's what I'm talking about. Because I make so much more, even when I'm making highly enriched uranium 233 and highly enriched 235, which has a lower 238 ratio, I still ran out of 238, which is why I guess for uranium, I recommend do not ever put uranium 238, turning it into stabilized uranium. Use 233 if you have to, or 235, which is what I'm doing right now, actually. Throwing it in there to be turned into stabilized uranium. So the thing about motes as well, and this is actually a common thing, the motes of Omnium serve to be a catch-all, right? A catch-all of automation catch-all, because it literally is just a compressed ingot of all the ingots in the game. And I think that kind of a lazy way to integrate all the materials in the game. Right? Like, that's the thing what I don't like. There's a common complaint of people like, oh yeah, I had to build this XYZ machine to do this one-off process that I've used once. Motes are kind of different in that case because you have to actually make it 500 times, or I don't know, I'm assuming 500 times. It could be 1,000 times, 2,000 times. But it's just like, you never really use, you know, like fucking, like you don't use, like, I can't even recall how many times I've used Solarium. I can't recall how many times I've used, I mean, I've used Blue Steel Dust, so that doesn't count. How many times have I fucking used Magnalium, right? Like, I have not made any Magnalium turbines. So this catch-all just tends to just suffer from the problem of, an expanded problem of, oh my god, I've set up all this one-time machinery that doesn't feel like it really justifies a place. So there's a level of tedium attached to Motes of Omnium that I'm not really comfortable with. But I guess if the intention is there to really have a comprehensive overall beat the pack feeling, then fine. This is what the Motes of Omnium are doing. But I really think that you could eliminate maybe a third of these materials and still have it just as fun. Just because I don't think you're adding any extra gameplay content. Like this Krypton and Radon and Mercury. I know that they're not Mercury. Krypton, Radon, like the solidified neon, the shit from the cryogenic air distillation, right? Like the xenon gas can either be used for neutronium nuggets, krypton gas for use that, or the EBF. Helium can be used for a bunch of things. Neon is only used for specifically the motes. Literally just get rid of fucking neon. And in fact, instead of having krypton and xenon, just have them all just use krypton. Just have, is there really a gameplay difference by having xenon only make neutrons? Why can't this just also just be krypton as well? Like, I know there's like a weird cool naming thing, and I know there's a completionist aspect because you are completing all the noble gases within that table of elements, right? But those thematic things don't really matter that much at this stage of the game. I mean, I guess maybe there is this one guy out there who's going to be like, you didn't include all the noble gases in your processing. This pack is terrible. I mean, I don't think it's worth satisfying that person. The extra materials, like, it's hard to strike a balance between what is, you know, overall encompassing and expansive versus overall tedium, right? You know, it's the difference between Project Ozone 3 having a quest to get all 33 copper hose, tin hose, silver hose, lead hose in its quest book, right? Like, that point is it's a chore list. It's not interesting gameplay content, and Motes of Omnium hugely suffer from that, and that partially stems from the fact that we have to use NukaCraft as a glorified processor, and partially because we have to play a catch-all gathering quest for all these ingots and materials that really don't do anything else than other to serve a Mote of Omnium. Laying down another 2 to 3 chemical reactors, like laying down chemical reactors early on for epoxid, for sulfuric acid, for, you know, this circuit board and multi-layer fiber circuit boards. I thought that was kind of cool because multi-layer circuit fiber boards were used also for various circuit recipes. Epoxy resin eventually forms a basis that will evolve into, you know, a wetware board, right? Like multi-layer fiber reinforced copper foil epoxy resin, but motes don't do any of that. Motes are not interesting. Motes are thematically cool and look fancy, and I know motes can serve a lot of hype because you take a screenshot of this fucker and you put it on Feed the Beast Reddit, you'll get a bunch of people like, oh my god, I gotta play this pack because it has a fucking tie-dye RGB fan, right? Look, I'm creating RGB fans. Amazing. This game is amazing. And just like that, half of those people, 99% of those people that probably do that, get hyped about it, won't even make it through the first 2/3 of the pack to complain about this gather quest, you know? That's how I don't know, that's just my feelings of it, and that's why I actually I'm probably gonna play Project Ozone 3 Kappa mode when it comes out, but I definitely know I'm not gonna play Titan mode because it's just gonna feel like this. It's gonna feel like this tedious gather quest, and I guess the thing is, like, turning modern Minecraft to a bunch of gather quests is just not fun, right? This was fun. This was great. Building the infrastructure, seeing how the logistics, the chemicals, the gases, the items all interact. Even just putting frames to make it look so my floating machines don't look weird. That was fun. That was what I was playing this pack for. So we'll see. The pre-mote push has been severely a huge detriment to the gameplay of the pack, and I guess that's possibly why I also didn't record for 3 days. In hindsight, it's almost thankful that I almost lost my voice, because I would just be bitching for 3 days. I'm just be like, I'm doing this shit again? All right, cool. So thank God that you guys skipped past through all that. Anyways, it's been an hour and 14 minutes of me recording, so maybe this might be an interesting episode, maybe it won't be, but we'll see. I'm not even sure if I want to include this episode as part of my normal schedule, because it has a lot more criticisms that I think and can set expectations for players in the pack before that. So we'll see. In fact, oh my God, I'm almost close to just publishing this right now, because yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'll probably will publish it right now, because I do think that there are certain applications before Damien, here's the thing, and before Damien gets like all crazy into making Omnifactory Omega mode, there should still be several existing issues that might need to be addressed in the late game of the base mode.